Good evening, everybody. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask everyone present in the chambers to silence their cell phones and other electronic devices. And I'll remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of technology during council meetings. It's 6:30 p.m. I'll call this council planning meeting to order. And I'll begin with this formal territorial acknowledgement. As we begin our meeting, I acknowledge that we are gathered on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We respectfully acknowledge that the Mississauga and Anishinaabe have been the stewards of this place. As we hear the truths behind our shared history, reconcile them with our past and with who we are today, we acknowledge that we are working toward right relations as good treaty people. In particular, we are thankful for our partnership with our neighbors from the Alderville First Nation. I have a motion to approve the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, second by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the March 17th, 2025 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of Council, have you any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Before I carry on, I do want to introduce us all to our new planner, Miranda Brentnell. Welcome to your first council planning meeting here in Brighton. I'm sure not your first planning meeting, but Miranda has planning experience with Frontenac County and the Township of Rideau Lakes. She is also the managing editor for the Canadian Planning and Policy Journal and has work experience with Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Ontario Minister of Natural Resources, StatsCan, and Archaeological Services, Inc. Miranda holds a degree in urban planning and a master's degree in earth and ocean sciences and urban and regional planning. And she belongs to the Ontario Professional Planners Institute and the Canadian Institute of Planners. So welcome tonight, but welcome to Brighton as well. We appreciate you joining our team here. Thank you. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council move into the statutory public meeting March 17th, 2025 at 6:33 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning item and then receive a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. It is during this meeting that council depends on the community to provide input for our decision. This input may be received in advance of the statutory public meeting by sending correspondence to the clerk's office and/or by making an oral submission to council at the statutory public meeting. This will best inform council on the land use planning matter prior to council making our final decision. Recent statutory changes limit appeal rights to only the applicant and specified regulated persons. For details or information on the new appeal process, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. The first item in our statutory public meeting is from applicants Rick Ebert and Jose Leclerc. Its location is 619 Lakeshore Road. There's an application for zoning bylaw amendment and applications for consent as well. So the purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain input towards making any decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. So, Mr. Warren, by what method and on what date was notice of these applications given?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the notice of the subject applications was provided in accordance with the Planning Act on February the 20th earlier this year to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to applicable agencies as required under the Act. And then in addition to that, a signed notice was also placed on the parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Absolutely. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment and the two consent applications is basically to sever the parcel located at 619 Lakeshore. We're on the south side of Lakeshore, just west of Rabbit Run to create two new residential lots which will front onto Lakeshore, resulting in the retained parcel, which will still have the current single residence on it. It will have a reduced land area to 0.72 hectares still, and will have frontage onto Rabbit Road.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the subject application, either in the gallery or on Zoom? Please come up and, yeah, I'm not sure if that microphone's on, Madam Clerk. There's a magic button at the back that makes everything happen. And would you please complete the information on the sheet in front of you too, please? Thank you. I'll just get you to introduce yourself to council and then carry on with your information.
Thank you. My name's Dale Egan. I'm a planner with RFA Planning Consultant. RFA was retained on behalf of the owners to provide professional planning services in support of this consent and rezoning application. We have reviewed the staff report and we are in agreement with it. We are here to answer any questions if any questions do arise. But again, we are in agreement with the staff report and have no further comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. That was a big lead up for that, but thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else present who has a question or comment with regard to the planning application? And I'll ask you to please complete the information in the sheet in front of you. Could you please push the silver button in front of you? Yeah. There you
Hello.
go.
My name is Angela Parkin and we own the property that's abutting 619. And my questions are more from an interest point of view. In the notice that we received, it mentioned that it's anticipated that one detached dwelling will be built on each lot. So what exactly does that mean, anticipated into the regulations? Does that mean that it's going to be, zoned for one property, or that it can be, how townhouses? Exactly what does anticipated mean?
Well, we all know what anticipated means,
Yeah.
but Mr. Warren, I'm going to ask you to field this question for us, please.
Through the chair, I will not provide a further definition of anticipated. And I think I spoke on the phone to either you or your
Yeah.
husband.
No, it's me.
Okay.
No, we had email interaction.
Right. Okay. I don't exactly know what you're looking for further.
There's a concern on our part that it's going to be density housing. I mean, rather than one dwelling on each lot.
Right. No, we would not expect anything further or generally permit anything further in a rural residential lot surrounded by residential than low density residential.
And I think that you mentioned that perhaps you could repeat it for me, the setbacks on the west side, which was abutting our property, which is that 4 meters or 6 meters? And because
I can give you the
find it.
response later, but I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
So you don't know what it is at the moment under the RR 57?
I could get it for you probably this evening, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay. Those are just the two concerns that we had.
If council were to proceed tonight and rezone as requested, we would be rezoning both lots both severed lots into rural residential zones. And that there, of course, are restrictions on that zoning.
Mm.
And I wonder if, Mr. Warren, do you have that list of things that can be placed on a rural residential zone?
No, pardon, through the chair, no faster than I can get the other response,
Very
which
well.
I'm seeking.
Okay. Which I think is exactly what the resident is looking for.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the gallery or on Zoom?
Yeah, I have a question.
Could you please
Yeah.
put your camera on so we can see you?
Okay. 1 second here. Right with you. Camera.
Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you. Could you
Good.
just introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, Mike Forgione. Question is, what are the lot sizes that we're looking at for these two lots? Are they the same size for each?
One is just shy of, well, they're both, one is just shy of 1,400 square meters and one's just over 1,300 square meters.
Okay, and what's that in feet or yards?
I don't know. I was educated in the 80s.
No, before you.
So give or take along Lakeshore Road. This is bad math, but it's about about 135. The one lot is about 135 feet.
In width?
Yeah,
And
along the road. That's the road frontage.
okay, all right. And how about the depth of that?
Let me think. About 102 feet.
Oh,
Give or
that's all
take.
it is, 102 feet. So
Think
they're not
so.
really deep lots, right?
They're not going to be deep lots.
No. Now, looking at Rabbit Road, what distance is that one lot? It would be east, on the east side, to Rabbit Road.
I don't have that in mapping. Does anyone have that handy?
It's abutting.
It's
The eastern lot is abutting Rabbit Road.
The eastern lot is abutting Rabbit Road, sir.
It's butting it.
Yes, it is.
So what are we looking at? 10 feet away, 15 feet?
From the,
Little curb there, the road itself?
it would be, the lot itself would be abutting Rabbit Road. So whatever the setbacks are,
Okay. Do we have the setbacks from Rabbit Road?
if we pass the rural residential zoning tonight, are we able to inform the gentleman what the setbacks would be? Mr. Warren?
Yes.
We
Is
can,
that the answer you're looking for or the number?
do you have the number handy?
I do not at this moment, but I can certainly.
Director Walsh, do you?
Through the mayor council, the interior side yard, so that would be the yard separate, well, it'd be an exterior side yard because it's next to a street. That requirement is 14 meters.
Oh, 14 meters, okay. So we're looking at about 42 feet to 50. Okay, that's fine. Now, in regards to when would this construction begin?
We have no building permit application because we haven't allowed the property to be zoned yet.
Okay, and what's,
What we're doing tonight is the land use planning application portion. So the consent for severance and the rezoning. If that all goes through, then there are conditions that the applicant needs to fulfill before the official severances are actually completed. And then they can ask for a building permit. We aren't aware this evening what the intent is for a building there.
okay, so this could be longer than 6 months, correct?
I suppose it could be, yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's good. Good to know. And I assume that Lakeshore Boulevard would be the main road they're going to use in the construction part of trucks and equipment coming to do the work. They're not using Rabbit Road whatsoever.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm sure our building department would want access to be from the main road, not from a residential subdivision road.
Okay, that's good to know. That's great. Okay, that's great. That's just one, and okay, no, that's fine. I got the picture now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Anyone else present with questions or comments with regard to the subject application? Any questions from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed and appreciate that it is right next to servicing, and it even says that servicing could be extended, which is great. If so, why the rural designation?
Mr. Warren?
I'm trying to recall why we came up with the rural designation, to be honest with you. It's not in the urban area, though. So that might be it itself.
The homes in Rabbit Run are in the built boundary, correct?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think Rabbit Run
Ends
is
it,
the
yeah.
end of the urban area on its west side, yeah.
My recollection is that the former owner of the property during an official planning process asked for that development now, that what is now a development, to be in the urban designation for the purpose of servicing. So, but designating it rural residential does not preclude it from receiving rural services. Is that what we are reading here in this report?
It usually is.
Yeah.
This is a very rare circumstance where there's a particular servicing scheme that was used that is being extended to these two lots.
Very well. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Mr. Warren, any final comments?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you. I do have a motion. Does council wish me to read this motion? It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the staff report dated March 17th, 2025, regarding the subject zoning amendment and consent applications for 619 Lakeshore Road. And further, that council grants provisional consent to applications B10 2022 and B11 2022, subject to the consent conditions provided in this report. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment application in order to rezone the two future lots from shoreline residential 1 zone to a specific site-specific rural residential zone in order to address the reduced lot areas and frontage. Is there any discussion? And Mr. Warren, you'll get back to the residents who had those quite specific questions.
Absolutely.
Please, thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next item in our statutory public meeting is to consider an official plan amendment number 18, community engagement policies and procedures, alternative public notice, and complete application information requirements. It's brought to us by Director Walsh. And so, Director Walsh, by what method and on what date was notice of this official plan amendment given?
To the Mayor to Council, notice was given on February 24th of this year. The notice of the official plan amendment was given through posting on the municipality's website and sending a copy of the amendment text to the prescribed agencies. As the amendment is applicable to the whole of the geography of the municipality, no notice was sent directly to each landowner. Also, with the municipality no longer having a local newspaper of regular distribution, no notice was given through that means. Leading up to the draft amendment, however, as shown as presented in today's agenda, community engagement included soliciting views and opinions of the public through a questionnaire on the municipality's website and establishing a working group of the community who identified a number of issues with recommendations that are reflected in the current official plan amendment as presented to council. No comments have been received since the notice of the public meeting.
Thank you, Director Walsh. And would you please explain the background and purpose regarding this amendment?
Yes, Mayor. The purpose of the official plan amendment is to allow the municipality to follow different routes in giving public engagement or community engagement. The Act has prescribed regulations how notice is to be given, of course, but it also has a policy that if you have alternative means of informing the public in your official plan policies, then you're permitted to follow those means. So this official plan amendment is intended to help us to give more latitude to and be more robust in our community engagement beyond the minimum as prescribed in the regulations. But specifically, it will establish a variety of methods for community engagement that will involve a clear basis for complete applications, and with that information being made available to the public at an earlier stage. It will recognize that municipality can apply other best practices, such as community workshops, opinion panels, and that sort of thing for larger developments that might impact the municipality as a whole. And also allow us to have maybe an advisory group that's represents a good cross section of the whole community, even dealing with maybe neighborhood specific applications. Lastly, is also to allow us to do some minor stuff without the need for public notice, such as housekeeping amendments or corrections to mistakes and other housekeeping matters.
Thank you, Director Walsh. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of the draft official plan amendment? No, there's no one online. So anyone in the gallery? There are none noted. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to the draft official plan amendment? And there's none noted. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
First of all, I love that we're doing this. Anything we can do to improve public engagement and customer service is awesome. I noticed in 4.1.b.ii, principle of land use, letter or memo from the proponent's planning professional in brackets RPP, meaning registered professional planner, providing a preliminary review of proposed development, et cetera, as part of the pre-consultation meeting. I deeply respect registered professional planners. I also know that there are not enough of them. A couple of years ago, I heard a report saying that there were 1,500 open planning positions in the province of Ontario. I expect it's higher now. And I know that finding a planning professional is not always easy. From time to time, in my work as a real estate agent, I will help people fill out their own planning forms or do so as their agent. I definitely do not have an RPP, and so would defer to planners in all matters of expertise, but nonetheless, I'm capable of putting together an application for a simple consent or rezoning. Is the inclusion of RPP in brackets here indicative of a requirement?
I think
Director?
you find that through Mayor to council, I think you'll find the verb there is not always a requirement so much as shall generally or may be a requirement for smaller scale application like a consent or a minor variance. We don't always ask for that. If there are some unique features in the area, such as a natural heritage feature or function, and any kind of special studies triggered by that, then we may ask for a registered professional planner to get involved at that point. So we'll gauge it based on the complexity of the application.
You may follow up.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. If we could make it more clear in the policy before it goes in, so that people don't feel that they are excluded or professionalized out of their own interests.
May I get that number, section number? Again?
Yes, it is 4.1.b.ii or 2.
Got it. Thank you.
My next question is about the pre-consultation meeting as well. I didn't see a description of the timeline for a pre-consultation meeting. We're very prescribed in terms of timelines once an application is complete. A few weeks ago, we had a housing solutions workshop in which we brought together planners and developers, et cetera. And one of the things I heard very clearly from developers was, in some cases, open hostility towards pre-consultation meetings, primarily because it's difficult to get one in a timely fashion. And so if we have to have an answer to a planning application within a certain number of days, once that complete application is in, but someone can't give us a complete application until they are able to get a meeting, which sometimes can take months to get. Is it possible for us to include in this some kind of maximum timeline from first contact to getting that sit-down pre-consultation meeting? And we no longer require the pre-consultation meeting, but we still really request and prefer it, and that's throughout this. But if it takes 3 months to get, then that's not acceptable either. Do you know what I mean?
Director?
Through the mayor, good question. We have a development review team that meets every 2 weeks. And so depending on the level of information we get in that initial inquiry, either they can make that one coming up or the one following. So it might be a month. But, and even as the simpler ones, we don't want to bother the whole development review team when we have immediate answers. So, but in terms of this policy, I probably wouldn't put that level of service statement within it. I think maybe we have other policies for customer service and response times, but I think there needs to be some kind of awareness and commitment to response times. I can't say, I know that group was throughout Northumberland. I hope and I like to think that for Brighton, it's not months before to get that pre-consultation. I say with some confidence that it hasn't been the practice here. And again, it comes back to the quality of the information that's submitted. I know some people want to kick tires and not really make much of an effort, and sometimes that in itself can delay things.
Follow up?
I appreciate that, and also hope and think that we do pretty well here as well. I mentioned I sometimes do planning applications for some of my clients, and working with other municipalities for the last little while. I check in every week, and I've been working on a simple severance for a year now in a different municipality, which is a simple surplus farmhouse. So I know that nobody's trying to make things take a long time. I do know that we have a 48-hour or 2 business day turnaround on responses as an internal policy. But I got a call from residents of Brighton today even saying that they haven't heard back in about a month on something. So not to, put anyone in the spotlight, but I know that everyone struggles to keep up with the load of inquiries and files. Every planning department in the province is scrambling. So no shade on anyone, but I do think we need to make sure we have a commitment to timely responses, because the response I got from these developers was that us requiring a pre-consultation meeting was actually shifting the burden of the timeline from the municipality to the developers, because we know that we're not on the clock, the provincial clock, until the complete application is submitted. And so they felt that municipalities, by requiring or emphasizing pre-con meetings, were actually just putting all of that time on them, because they're still, putting out financial outlay while waiting for that pre-consultation meeting.
Director?
Those are good points. The idea behind pre-consultation, of course, is that they manage the risk and their costs and their time so that they can avoid rework if they get it wrong the first time. However, the Planning Act was amended to no longer permit municipalities to require pre-consultation. It's now the option of the proponent. So the onus now does shift towards a complete application requirement. Well, we've provided some incentives for pre-consultation, such as holding application fees at the rate at the time of pre-consultation in the event that our fees go up and things like that. So I think we're trying to encourage pre-consultation with some of those kind of incentives, and to require less information at the time of pre-consultation. Just give us a concept plan. We don't want to talk about studies or anything. We don't want you to go to the cost or expense. Just give us a concept plan. That's what we need to see. That's what we need to know. And if you're not able to do that, then that tells us you're not even ready. And it's not really a good use of staff time either. So that's what I mean by some kicking tires. And I'm very happy to help somebody if we had the time to assist them and wear my economic development hat at the time and help our manager out that way maybe. But otherwise, when we're getting into the machination of the Planning Act, we really have to make sure we stay focused on what a complete application is and not talk about complete application until that principle of land use is addressed. Because if they spent $200,000 doing background work on complete studies, only to say, gee, you know what, that permitted use needs to be really reshaped or downsized or rescaled, that's not good customer service. And they may not feel like it at the time, but ultimately it is. Because some consultants will really push for that complete application because that's what they really want to work on when it's quite premature. So we try and keep the horses in the barn and well watered and fed before we let them out.
Understood, and I totally understand and appreciate that. I guess my last comment on it is to reaffirm that probably the best way to get them into a pre-consultation meeting is to make sure it can happen in a timely fashion.
Anyone else? Mr. Walsh, do you have any final comments?
No further comments, Mayor.
Thank you. So I'll read the, pardon me, I'll read the motion and then maybe we'll have a little more discussion. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that Council received the staff report dated March 17th, 2025 regarding official plan amendment number 18 pertaining to community engagement policies and procedures and complete information requirements for Planning Act applications. And that after hearing public comments and making any appropriate amendments, staff be directed to present a final official plan amendment, pardon me, number 18 to council at its next available session for consideration of adoption of OPA number 18. Questions or comments from members of council? With your noted amendment wish for 4.1 1B2, do you want to pass this tonight? Do you want to, how should we, and I guess I'd ask, before I get you, I'll ask Director Walsh what the intent is there. By that, I mean, what do you intend to do next? If we were to say yes to this, would you be making any changes? We're not asking you to in this motion.
I mean, I could provide some clarification that the requirement for an RPP is commensurate with the scale and complexity of the project. And I can make that change. And if it's council's wish, I can take a look at pre-consultation and see if there's some language in there that might benefit the intent of providing higher level quality service at the pre-consultation stage. But it would be more of a general and directive phraseology if council's willing to trust the director in coming up with something meeting that intent. And
So what I'm about to say is not any mistrust in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
But if that's the case and we're getting new wording around this, may I suggest we refer it to you and to be brought back?
I'd be happy to bring it back.
Yeah, bring it back at a future planning meeting. Go ahead.
I think my concern would be just as satisfied if we had an internal policy similar to the 2 business day email return policy regarding setting a goal for prompt pre-consultation meetings. I don't know that it needs to be written into the OPA, but I would still prefer clarification over the RPP because it did look like that was required.
Is it your wish that we refer it to staff or write in as amended?
Since the change is very simple of clarifying RPP, I think as amended would suffice.
Well, you're the mover, so.
Then I so move as amended.
Councillor Butwell, do you agree as the seconder to that friendly amendment?
I do, yes.
So the second line now reads, and that after hearing public comments and making any appropriate amendments, staff be directed to present a final official plan amendment number 18 as amended to council at its next available session for consideration of adoption of OPA number 18. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Butwell.
was going to say, thank you, Your Honor. Just to clarify, that does capture bringing through some sort of guideline in terms of the pre-consultation meeting? Just to clarify, is that what we've just,
Not into the OPA.
not into the OPAs?
Into your microphone, though.
Not, what we've suggested is that we could have an internal staff policy setting guidelines for how quickly they can set up pre-consultation meetings. We did not elect to put that into the official plan amendment.
Okay, so that's was my understanding. So does that mean we are, we then would like to have a policy developed on that? That's a separate item then.
I guess it behooves the question, would we not be better to ask for it to be included in the OPA?
Absolutely.
Ties it up into a nice little bow, rather than asking staff to then create another policy that would have to come back to council. And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe staff would be better to answer that question. So Director Walsh, I will ask you to.
Normally, we try and keep numbers out of a policy level document and put it into a guidance document or other more pertinent level of policy. So that would be the preferred route, because it also requires us to take a look at resource levels too, and when we start establishing levels of service. So it might take a bit more head scratching. I think with Miranda joining us here, I mean, I think that's going to really help us resume our level of service that we were accustomed to previously, and I think that might be the preferred route to take. It's just leave it for another venue for issuance guidance policy of council or a directive of council. I think our level of service policy of 2 business days for inquiries is something we have to adhere to for that initial contact. But for more fulsome service follow-up that Council Willing is referring to, that's base 2. So I think we need to revisit that, but in some way, but not in the official plan amendment.
Thank you. Councilor Botwell.
Thank you again. I completely understand where you're coming from. I know that it's difficult when you're dealing with high volumes of work, and there are some really important projects coming down. I think it also behooves us to set a guideline and have something to work towards. And if we do have staffing issues where we would require more staff, that will actually challenge us to consider, should we need to add to staff rather than reducing service level, actually increasing our complement. So for example, I heard you say meeting bi-weekly, and generally within 30 days, you would have something to go on, even creating something a little further out. So in it, say 6 weeks, and having it as an outside goal. And if we're finding that if it's not enough time, then maybe we do need to look at staffing. Or if it's, I just like the idea of holding ourselves to a standard, especially when it is with our local, for an example, our builders who have more complex files, wanting to move the ball forward and feeling hemmed in, or feeling as if they can't get things done. So I think it's good to have, say, for example, a policy or wider service level goals, but I don't want it to just get pushed down the ice.
I get that too. And the more I think about whether we would include this in an OPA or as a separate document, I'm favoring the separate document only because I wouldn't want to see us in front of the tribunal trying to explain why we were a day late and $1 short. And then having to just, live with whatever the developer wanted to do at that stage, because we missed a deadline because we were short staffed or someone was out sick or what have you, right? Anything can happen. So then I ask, is staff comfortable with that as direction, or would you like to see a separate motion? providing direction. I'm asking you, yeah, you're the boss.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're comfortable with the direction of council. You know, the intent when we're looking at the pre-consultation is to get them prepared to have a fulsome application so that staff can do the work that they do. So to set that timeline to now say, now you need all of your ducks in a row just to get to the pre-consultation, it just seems like we're duplicating the same type of work. So I think certainly with Miranda on board, our planning department is well equipped to address any of the pre-consultation requests that come in. And certainly if they're not, I'm sure I will hear about it, and Director Walsh and I'll have a conversation.
And then we'll hear about it. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you again. Could we perhaps say, where are we now? We're in the middle of March. Could we perhaps have a circle back maybe in 6 months and see what the actual timelines are? So we can maybe not just drop it off the radar, but have it as this item that we'll see maybe. So 6 months, average number of days till that pre-consultation.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this whole community engagement process, it would be great to come back in 6 months or even 9 months just to report back to council on how it's working, if the director's okay with that.
No motion of direction required. You got it. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. That's the final item in our statutory public meeting. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council move out of the statutory public meeting, March 17th, 2025 at 7:11 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Brings us to planning and development reports. The first is a pay-on-demand surety bonds to secure land use planning obligations report. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Nothing to add, Mayor, to Council. This is really a response to new regulations. So it's a mandate now that we accept surety bonds. And so this is simply a few measures in which how we might implement that.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receives a staff report dated March 17th, 2025 regarding a new policy regarding pay-on-demand surety bonds that are intended to secure developer obligations for the completion of required works pertaining to Planning Act applications. And the council accepts surety bonds as regulated as a form of financial surety in development agreements for the purposes of ensuring works are completed. And the council approve the surety bond acceptance policies shown as attachment number 2 to this report, and that staff be authorized to release existing deposited letters of credit in exchange for surety bonds and make any housekeeping related revisions to provisions in previously approved development agreements, such as subdivision agreements and site plan control agreements, as may be advised by the municipal legal counsel. Is there any discussion? So I understand that this is a legislated requirement. We have no choice but to go down this road. Does this put the municipality in any financial risk at all?
Well, I suppose there's always some risk when you don't have cash in hand. But these are pay-on-demand surety bonds, so they are considered liquid. That there's no adjudication by an insurance company. If you're making a claim, there's no process. We just say that the work's not done and we need to recover the cost to complete the works. And that's pretty much long and short of it. That's our understanding. To our benefit, we've never had to exercise a draw on a letter of credit. We do have one instance in the municipality where a subdivision was approved and constructed, and prior to its assumption, there was a misconstructed sanitary. And when the works were to be corrected through a letter of credit loan, behold, letter of credit was expired. So these, we do have an experience where, things didn't go quite according to Hoyle. Luckily, we've had no reported problems with that particular sanitary. It seems to still be functioning. So these are necessary measures to be taken, but in speaking with some of the insurance people in the field, the insurance companies themselves are insured. So there's various layers of insurance here, and we're not hearing any problems from other larger jurisdictions who've been practicing this for a number of years. I presume this is no bright idea suddenly by the province, that there are some municipalities who've taken the lead on this in the past, and it became a best practice at some point, and now the advice from some of those municipalities come forward saying we should all be doing this, and the province has brought in the regulation accordingly. So you'll see that there are some fairly strict requirements to the ingredients of a surety bond when it's submitted to the municipality. So that template will require that all those very important ingredients are there before it's accepted. Thank
you for that. I appreciate that this helps keep capital in the marketplace and allows for other projects to move forward. And in a world where we want to see housing built, I think that's important. I also have a duty to make sure we're protecting the municipality regardless of what the legislation might be. So
for sure. And what we're hearing from some of the developers of the banks weren't even willing to give letters of credit for whatever reason recently. And I think the last one was they had to give us basically cash. The last two major developments, so Brighton Meadows and Butler Creek condos, they basically gave us a certified check because they really couldn't get much cooperation from their respective financial institutions.
Well, that surely takes capital out of the marketplace, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the answer. Any further questions from members of council? Councilor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just based on what you said there, that the line of credit had expired on that one project, do surety bonds expire?
No, they don't. I think they do have a date on them, but they are supposed to automatically renew. Yeah.
Thank you both. Anyone else? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is a request for declaration of and sale of surplus lands. Application RC 01-2025. Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Through the chair, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council receives a staff report dated March 17th, 2025 regarding application file number RC 01-2025 for the declaration of surplus and sale of lands pertaining to an unopened road allowance, and the council authorized staff to begin the public process to declare surplus to the needs of the municipality the lands described as municipal road allowance between lots 2 and 3, concession 7, and further that after receiving public comments, a staff report be presented to council for consideration at a subsequent council meeting. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I noticed that looking at the two maps, one showing the subject property in context and the other showing the portion that they look to close and purchase, would that landlock the rest of the road allowance? What's going to happen with the rest of it?
Mr. Warren?
Through the chair, what we looked at is basically from that portion north is our environmentally sensitive lands that would not be generally subject to development. And that's one of the reasons we kind of capped it at that particular spot.
Thank you both. Any other questions from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is draft policy development charge deferral prepayment and interest rate policy. And I just see the policy. I don't see the report. Yes, I know. I don't think I opened it. So Director Walsh, because I have not had a chance to read this report, I will ask if you could take us through it at a high level, please.
Yes, Mayor, happy to do so. So Development Charges Act was amended several times, and the latest version is such that we need an interest rate policy because we're allowed to defer the payment of development charges in certain development situations. Two in particular. One is for rental housing developments, and secondly for institutional. And for us, institutional includes Omni, so it's very relevant. And for rental, we have some rental buildings being constructed on Main and Rundle, so very relevant issues for us. So in those two situations, we're allowed to charge an interest rate for the deferred period of time that DCs are not being paid. So in the case of the rental, they get deferred over 6 years with installment payments, but during that 6-year period, then there's interest that we can charge. And secondly, there is a freeze on DCs. So January 1, 2020, if you had your application in for a zoning amendment, for example, and it was approved, but you waited 5 years before you got your building permit, and building permit being the time when you pay your DC, then we are allowed to apply an interest rate during that period of time. So this policy lays out what that interest rate would be. The Act allows us to charge a certain maximum rate, which is 1% over a blended prime rate among the top 6 banks. And that was also supposed to calculate it quarterly. So administratively, there's a burden there. And I suspect, although we haven't formalized anything, we'll just be maybe relying on Watson Economics, who put together a development charges bylaw, who have offered to have a bit of a thing on their website to do a calculation that will be convenient to their clients. So I suspect that what we'll be maybe relying on. This particular policy addresses those situations, but it also addresses two other matters. One is to recognize that some developments do offer some community benefits. And that's a term that's used in the Planning Act for other things, and I've borrowed that for this particular situation. But it gives council the option of deferring DCs for developments that, say, are providing something that benefits the whole community, such as maybe daycares or pools or assembly halls. There's a number of things, and the policy says, and the report maybe suggests that council come back at a later time with a directive on what is considered acceptable community benefits. But this will require an agreement with council, so council will always get a review of that at an appropriate time. The other thing this policy does is acknowledge that some developments may have the opposite effect, that it's having an adverse impact on municipalities' fiscal situation by demanding extension of infrastructure prematurely. It's not in our development charges bylaw. It's not in our long-term capital works bylaw or program, for example. And in short, we just can't afford to pay for it right now. So this policy says that developers can prepay their DCs. And with that financial injection, then we can maybe then help pay for that infrastructure. So that's not uncommon. Prepayments tend to be, well, they did it in both in the city of Belleville and in Prince Edward County last couple of years for some major infrastructure improvements there. So that's the long and short of it, Mayor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just to be clear, we have seen and reviewed the policy itself, but we just weren't, we didn't have access to your report until sometime this afternoon. And I confess I didn't get a chance to download it and read it. So thank you. I appreciate you taking it through. I have a motion moved by Council Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council receive the staff report dated March 17th, 2025, regarding the establishment of a policy pertaining to the prepayment or deferral of development charges and any related interest rate, the establishment and any related interest rate, the establishment of interest. That doesn't feel like English to me.
I think simply worded would be, and with the establishment of an interest rate policy.
So we'll read, and any related interest rate and the establishment of an interest rate policy?
I think it best to be read as the deferral of development charges and the establishment of any related interest rate. Semicolon. Apologies.
It's okay, we got through it. I'm going to start again. Because Councillor Rowley, I'm going to need your permission to make this change. And Deputy Mayor, I'm going to need your permission. So it's moved by Councillor Rowley, if agreed, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council receive the staff report dated March 17th, 2025, regarding the establishment of a policy pertaining to the prepayment or deferral of development charges and the establishment of any related interest, and that Council accept the draft policy for the purposes of receiving comments from the community, and that the policy be brought forward to Council at its next session for consideration of final approval. Councillor Rowley, you okay with those changes? Deputy Mayor Anderson, you okay with those changes? Any questions or comments from members of Council? Councillor Wheeldon.
I have a comment and then a question. First of all, thank you for this. Very exciting. At the Housing Solutions Workshop, heard a lot from developers about how important DCs can be to their cash flow and their ability to have more than one project going at a time or things like that, because often they need to borrow from banks in order to pay the DCs, and they're not going to be able to get their payoff until the units are sold. And so they're holding that debt for a long time. And so in terms of their bottom line, but also in terms of especially their cash flow, they've asked repeatedly for deferral of DCs, if not reduction of DCs. And so deferral is a great step for them that doesn't cost us too much. And I've seen that across all of the literature I've been reviewing from other municipalities that also have task forces. So that's really great. On 7.2, which is the development supplying community benefits, you've got a list of wonderful things that are good for our community for which we could defer DCs. One of them you mentioned, mixed-use developments contributing to sustainable development standards, such as LEED. And one thing I want to note, I don't know if it needs to be in there, although it might be good to clarify, is that oftentimes getting the actual certification for LEED adds significantly to the cost of something. So there are a lot of people who are building to that standard without necessarily being certified. I think it would be to our benefit to say that certification is not necessarily required, but that we want them to build to that standard. If we're capable of in-house being able to check and see if somebody is built to that standard, I think that's beneficial. And the other thing that I would ask that we add there is accessibility standards. I know that universal design makes a better world for everyone, but is not technically required under any of our building codes. But gosh darn, it would be nice to have in all new buildings if we normalized that. And so if people are willing or are able to get a DC deferral because they build to a more accessible design, I think that's worth incentivizing. And the other thing that I wanted to ask about this is specifically, there's mention in here of actually waiving interest on DC deferrals for affordable housing. And I've been reading the Mississauga Mayor's Task Force on Housing and Affordability, and they talked about leveraging this in many different ways to give reductions in interest or things like that for some priority items. Obviously, affordability is the number one, and I'm glad that our truly affordable housing is exempt from interest on that. But what you've provided us here is a flexible tool, and I just want to encourage using it to create as many incentives as possible for good things.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members of council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to the sign control bylaw. Enforcement Officer McGee, we have read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no comment at this time.
Now you sound like an American politician, Mr. McGee. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council receives a staff report regarding a sign control bylaw dated March 17th, 2025, and further that council approves and passes bylaw. Is it numbered? It's not numbered yet. Bylaw to be numbered, a bylaw to regulate and control signs within the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. There is a section that describes signs that it's just the section describes prohibiting signs that are illuminated, animated, or operated in such a way that it constitutes a hazardous distraction for vehicular or pedestrian traffic. And I struggled to square that with the fact that that's literally illuminated or animated signs are there to drag your attention. The digital signage is specifically designed to get more engagement, to the point where they animate signs at the counter at fast food joints so that it will draw your attention to higher priced items. If they can engage us at that level, having animated signs next to the highway, it's literally there to draw our attention. And so for that reason alone, I'm uncomfortable with having LED signage in the municipality, almost period. I find it very distracting. I really appreciate that you included in there that illuminated signs like that have to shut off at 8 p.m. Love that. I've had situations before where I've been night blinded by seeing an LED sign all of a sudden switch to an all white background. That can be very dangerous, but I do find LED signage, especially anything that's moving, very distracting. And I worry that, I mean, we're very far off from Times Square, but I'd rather not have to walk it back later if we end up with an abundance of these. Does that make sense?
I didn't really hear a question in there.
The question is, can we say on one hand that digital signage that is illuminated, animated, or operated in such a way that constitutes a hazardous distraction for traffic is not referring to all digital signage? I don't feel that we can. I don't know. I guess that's a rhetorical question. And so it seems like we have a contradiction within the bylaw that I would like to avoid by suggesting that we remove digital signage from the bylaw, period. That would be my preference.
Could you be more specific as to what you're asking?
The bylaw itself seems to suggest that digital signage is inherently distracting.
Yes.
And yet it also allows for digital signage.
Right.
How can we both prohibit and support digital signage within the same bylaw unless we are working around, I guess we're relying on, are we relying on your subjective judgment on a sign by sign basis?
Mr. McGee.
Through you, Mayor. Well, the signs that we currently have in the municipality, they were all the sign variants that council approved. So instead of going through the sign variance process every time, we were looking to just make LED signs allowed. Yeah, the flashing, the illumination, that I think was the big reason it wasn't a allowed sign for the longest time. But I think the signs that we currently have, maybe for one, except for one, that don't create those current risks. They're far enough off the road, or if they're in a low traffic area. So, I mean, I guess it'd be on case by case signs. Staff would need to approve the location and make sure that it's not causing any of those adverse effects.
Not sure that answers the question, but I appreciate the answer you've given. Do you have a follow-up?
That does answer how we got to this point. Is there an option for us tonight to scratch the section that allows for digital signage?
We can, it's our bylaw. We can do whatever we want. I would not favor that, as you know, we've had this conversation. I've been around the table when we have had people come and we've allowed a sign variance, fairly universally, and I think that's why we're here. Clearly, councils of the past have been favorable of these kinds of signs. So I would not favor that, but that doesn't mean a majority of council would. So if you'd like to throw something out there, Councilor Wright.
I would say as a business owner that I wouldn't support taking LED signs off the table entirely. I drove past one last night out on County Road 2, and it's actually a fairly subdued LED sign. And, you know, knowing where they can go, having lived in the GTA for 25 some odd years, I've seen some signs that are pretty troubling and blinding, and, you know, that's certainly not it. I think as a business owner, you know, you're always trying to do the next best thing that you can to get eyes on your business, and that's going to be all the more important potentially over the next 4 years. So I think trusting our bylaw to have that case by case basis, like, yeah, you don't want a sign that's spinning so fast, or, you know, words that are ripping past, or something being like some sort of picture being posted on that's going to cause someone to slam on their brakes. But I don't think we can rule out LED signs in entirety. The one on County Road 2, I think is perfectly acceptable.
And certainly the suggestion that they be shut off at 8 p.m., the regulation they be shut off at 8 p.m. Assists in certain drivability circumstances and in neighborhood, neighborhood glare out your window, because a lot of our businesses are right beside residential areas too. So I do like those 2 points that we've put in there to try to help protect people against the glare of these signs, while also permitting groups and businesses to have these signs, knowing we need to up the ante a little bit in this day and age, because people are missing the information on the more traditional signage. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. I do want to clarify. I agree that one on Highway 2 is very subdued in comparison to some others, and not to pick on churches, but they have very active animated signs. There are 2 of them in town like that. And I don't know if you've noticed the new animated billboards at the en route in Trenton, but they're downright dangerous, highly distracting. And so I want to make sure that that's not in our future. And I recognize that this bylaw says that billboard size signs are restricted to 401. Appreciate and respect that. And I know Councillor Brutwell has mentioned to me concern for rural, keeping these out of rural area. And so restricting that to the 401 seems to largely do that. But I'll let you mention that yourself. But yeah, I would rather not see any more signs like the one at the church around the corner from my house. Nothing against that church, but very distracting sign.
Anything further from members of council? Councillor Botwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just to touch on what my colleague to the right stated, perhaps motion LEDs might be, you know, they're supposed to be off at 8 p.m., but perhaps looking at the rural areas versus the downtown core area where you have a lot of business. Either way, it's at your discretion. Question though, being that it is somewhat discretionary, what does seem that the signs need to be turned off at 8 p.m., those specific signs, what is the enforcement on that? Is it driven by resident complaint?
Mr. McGee?
It would still be generated on complaint basis, so if the neighbors have an issue with it, they can contact staff.
Thank you both. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. With the few digital signs that we have in the community, have we had any complaints about anything other than maybe Councillor Wilden's driving distraction issue? And do we shut our municipal LED signs off at 8 o'clock? I don't believe that we do.
Mr. McGee?
No comments on the LED signs, except for the one on near Mr. Wilden or Councillor Wilden's house. There was restrictions put on it back when Ken Hertford was here, but moving continuously, and it had to be fixed for 1 minute before it went to another. As you've seen in the bylaw, we've done 10 seconds. So if council, with that being a distraction, if we want to put it back, if we want to have a longer time than 10 seconds flipping between each slide, we could do that. But no complaints. It's been mostly community groups, churches, the Legion. I believe we have another church that wants to utilize that sign. As for our own signs, our bylaws we don't regulate our own property. Lead by example, maybe.
And while we don't regulate our own property, and it wouldn't be up to you, Mr. McGee, to do so, I would suggest that we should probably eat our own dog food, so to speak. And if we're asking everyone else to shut their signs off at 8 p.m., we should also do the same. So if this bylaw is passed, I don't know if staff would need a motion to follow that direction, but I think we should probably do what we're asking everyone else to do. Seems only fair. Councillor Rowley.
But I would have a concern about that. Those municipal signs that we have are certainly a great communication tool. And I would say, especially in times of an emergency or whatever, they should be running. So I don't have any issues. And I know exactly the sign that Councillor Wilden talks about. I probably see more of those lights than you do from my house. And they are not distracting.
I would like to have a debate about distraction, but another time maybe. Anything further from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just because simply you mentioned it right now that we should eat our own dog food, then I would like to make a motion that the municipality follow the sign bylaw put in place, with the exception of when there is an emergency situation or dangerous weather event or something like that.
The CAO did nod and say that she would be willing to. Do you still want to put a motion out on the floor to that purpose?
Sure.
So I do have a motion on the floor.
Sure.
Once we disseminate with that, then I will accept your motion as well. Anything further on the motion? Those in favor? Oh, well, we'll go right ahead.
I had another question, and I've probably lost it now, looking through the bylaw, Mr. McGee, but I know one discussion a few years ago regarding the signs were the size of signs, especially within the urban area. You know probably exactly which sign I'm mostly referring to, the one at the corner of Maplewood and Main. Have we kind of shrunk the maximum size now?
Mr. McGee.
No, that size is still the same. I believe it's like 98 square feet. But yeah, that was an awfully large sign for an area like that.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. I think that's far too big. I think that's a big distraction as well, as far as especially mostly within the municipal area or the urban area, especially down in the downtown core, to see a 10 by 10 foot by 10 foot sign. I know we let that one pretty well slide basically on framing it out, but I don't think signs downtown should be that big.
So what's the solution then? Make them smaller. What size? Well, it's your bylaw.
Mr. McGee, is there a size that you would suggest other than 10 by 10? I'm thinking maybe 6 by 6.
There you go. You did have a number. Mr. McGee.
Now with that sign, it was attached to a commercial building. We don't have a lot of commercial buildings, I think, west of Mead, if I can recall. So
There's not a lot today,
yeah,
but tomorrow is another day.
Yeah,
And they're coming.
I'm almost,
We can take it back.
yeah, I'd say take it back because I think, allowing it opens the door because, for every business to have off lot signs. I know there's some businesses that aren't on on Main Street. They are kind of tucked down Richardson and down Ontario Street that, they need that kind of to get them, the people from the main road to those side streets. But also too, it could almost be a renewal, at least that can, prevent, I think, signs from continuously being added to Main Street. So I guess staff will bring that back and determine an appropriate size.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to deter anyone who has a business that is not on Main Street, certainly, especially in these days and times. Everyone needs to have the opportunity to get as much business as they can right now. I just find, like I said, that one particular sign is very, very big. And I think signs in a little bit smaller area, or, a smaller size could be sufficient as well if we're going to have them downtown. But I would leave that up to you, Mr. McGee. Thank you.
So is the suggestion that we pass this tonight and staff would come back with a new number for an amendment? I'm just trying to figure out where we are with this size of signing. This size of signage, Director.
Sure, I just consulted Mr. McGee here, and we feel we can bring it back with there's no time sensitivity with this bylaw. If it's not sensitive to council time, it's not sensitive to any potential applicants for a sign that we're aware of at this time. So we've got the time to take it back and review the size of signs in the downtown and core area. We've introduced some new provisions related to the core commercial area, purposely trying to do that. But I guess on the edges of it, we haven't quite captured that. So I think it's worth that second review.
So instead of approving and passing, we would refer to staff for a future report.
Yes.
Councillor Butwell, are you okay with that as the mover?
Most definitely.
Councillor McCausland as the seconder? Any further discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Councillor Butwell, do you want to wait for your motion to direct staff until we actually have a new sign bylaw?
I would agree to that. I think that's probably most appropriate.
Okay, thank you. The next report, the next is items for information purposes. This is from Ontario Land Tribunal. It's OLT 240000. I think I did that right. 000093. Motion brought by JRB Williams Enterprises seeking an order awarding costs payable by the Municipality of Brighton. There is no report, so there'd be no request for staff to provide any information unless we have questions. So I'm going to read the motion. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receive the OLT 24000093 motion brought by JRB Williams Enterprises Inc. seeking an order awarding costs payable by the municipality for information. Questions or comments? I have a comment. My comment is thus. I am, first of all, I'm disappointed to see that the tribunal has awarded these costs, but that's neither here nor there. Sometimes that's the cost of doing business when we litigate. My disappointment is in how they framed it, referring to council's decision as frivolous and vexatious. And while I appreciate the work that the OLT does, and I'm sure these members are beyond the pale in terms of their ability to adjudicate these things, I find it incredibly insulting that they have referred to our motion to support a neighborhood in our community as frivolous and vexatious. And that's really all I'll have to say on that. It does nothing at the end of the day for me to make that comment, other than that when I read this order, and the order provides this municipality with a cost payable because we've been, and I quote, frivolous and vexatious, it is A, untrue, and B, insulting, just incredibly insulting. What we did was considered very carefully the application by JRB Williams, et cetera. And, you know, if it's prosecuting the original tribunal decision, you know, one doesn't ever want to go down that road, but the fact that the tribunal decided to consider a revised plan without sending it back to the municipality for consideration is even further insulting, in my opinion. So there's a lot going on here. I've been trying to unpack it in as calm a way as I can, but it provides me with some concern. I'm not saying that council was right in our decision, and I'm frankly I wasn't surprised that we were found to be wrong in our decision. That's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, I think the tribunal wants to see houses built, and so they are likely to side with those who are building houses. I get that. But when a council makes a decision on behalf of a local neighborhood, that is not, I mean, it was not an inconsiderate decision that council made. We considered all sides of the coin. We spoke to our thanks for our staff providing the recommendation that they provided, and understood from a planning perspective why we were getting that recommendation. And so when we said this does not fit the character of this neighborhood, there are other now I go deeper into my other concerns, and I think maybe it would be more appropriate to have our solicitor appear before us to vet some of those concerns. But it makes me question why we weren't provided with different advice as we went down the road. And I think I'm going to park it there so that I don't upset someone whom we depend on for other things. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Councillor Rowley.
I agree 100% with your comments. In fact, thank you for saying it so diplomatically, because I'm not sure I would have done quite as nice a job as you have. So my question might be to the CAO, because I know, or I'm saying if I read this correctly, our solicitor will be sending some kind of correspondence back to this. Can we ask at that point that a strong message from this council go back, as far as your comments, Mayor, that this was kind of insulting to have to read this? I was really kind of gobsmacked to read that. They really thought that we were certainly not taking our job seriously enough to consider all comments and all concerns from all neighborhoods here in Brighton. I was too. I was very gobsmacked to read this. And as I said, I'm not so sure I would have kind of communicated as diplomatically as you did.
I think you're doing a fine job, Councillor Rowley. CAO, there was a question in there.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Rowley, or to Council, Our solicitor is expected to attend our next council session on the 24th, and perhaps we could add this to the agenda as well to have a discussion at that time.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wright.
I would just say much of the same. There were points through reading this that just, left me gobsmacked that the language was used the way that it was. I'm disappointed with the final decision, given the council that we were. So I really have some questions for when we get together on that date.
So we look forward to that conversation next week. No, yeah, next week. Anything further for members of council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first bylaw is the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer, specifically Mr. McGee, who I will note was awarded a King's Coronation Medal for his work with the Quinte West OPP Auxiliary recently. No?
That was for Mad Canada.
Oh, that was your,
Yeah.
Mad Canada. So what was your award for your
Oh,
work?
the Auxiliary of the Year for the OPP.
Oh. See? The awards just keep on coming with you, buddy. Good work regardless, or because of. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to appoint Alan McGee as a municipal bylaw enforcement officer for the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next bylaw is the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer, being Samantha Shepherd, with a motion moved by Councillor Wright.
Could I ask a question based on the last one just for a minute?
Yeah,
Because my understanding is Mr. McGee has always been our bylaw enforcement officer. Why are we doing this now?
that's probably a good question. I like that. Do you want to answer that, Mr. McGee?
So basically, since 2014, some of the provincial statutes have changed. One being the Police Service Act, which we didn't do in 2014. So you've seen that we've had, I think it's the Community Protection and Police Services Act now. So that been added in for, I guess we'll say, officer safety and protection. So as you reread in the news that bylaw officers are assaulted, that if that happens and we have this in the bylaw, then they would be charged as though they were assaulting a police officer. So so it's more severe now. So, but a lot of it was just to clean up some of the old language in it and updated provincial statutes. Welcome.
Thank you both. I will start again with this next motion. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to appoint Samantha Shepherd as a municipal bylaw enforcement officer for the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next bylaw is the zoning bylaw amendment. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140, 2002, as otherwise amended, of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton, as it applies to the lands located at 619 Lakeshore Road, described as part of Lot 6, Broken Front Concession, being parts 1 to 3 on Registered Plan 38R 3221. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And we have referred the sign bylaw back to staff, so I will not read this motion with regard to the sign bylaw. Which brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has a question with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? Mr. Green.
Thank you for the record, David Green. I'm speaking to the sign bylaw specifically, 6.13B. The LED sign shall only be operated during the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I think the 8 p.m. is a little restrictive. I believe that it should be later than that. Our noise bylaw, I believe, is 11 p.m. So I would like consideration for that if the bylaw is going back. And also the two wall-mounted signs are the ones that often display animation with things moving. The other three signs primarily are just words. And I don't find the words as distracting as we do the animation. So my question is, will consideration or can consideration be given to changing the hours, increasing from, I was not available to attend the original discussion on this, but I know that those applicants, there are others that are going to apply for a sign variance. And right now it would have to be a sign variance because the bylaw is not in place yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff can consider that and bring it back, and then we can have discussion around it at council. Is that a fair comment? And I actually don't disagree. Kind of marrying the times up with other ordinances kind of makes a lot of sense. From a enforcement point of view, I know that doesn't work for Councillor Wheeldon because then it extends the period of distraction for him. But yeah, everyone should be, it's 10 o'clock. Don't you know? Do you know where your children are? Isn't that the old 80s ad? Is there anyone else present who has a question with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? I have a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Planning Meeting held on March 17th, 2025. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the March 17th, 2025 planning meeting adjourn at 8:02 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Let us continue to work for prosperity and freedom here in Brighton and across this country of many nations, and may God save the King.